University Technology Malaysia. Innovative, entrepreneurial, global. A global award-winning university in engineering and technology that coexists in the community to contribute to mankind. We invest in laboratories and facilities, empowering our people to solve life challenges. We nurture innovative minds through research and teaching because innovative minds drive competitive and innovative research culture. Life problems are brought into the labs to test our inventions against imperfections. Our facilities enrich our students' life because conducive environment triggers creative minds. We empower students to be active contributors in the ecosystem. UTM embraces inclusivity and diversity. Together, making a difference, our entrepreneurial talents continue to improve the quality of life. We reach out to where it matters, the society. Treating water for consumption. Our research products and services have made a difference to many lives. We provide engineering solutions for sustainable development, and our engineering solutions uplift the quality of life and well-being. Our experts are mobilized to affected sites to respond to calls for help. We are proud to serve and make a difference. UTM strives with total commitment to attain excellence in science, technology and engineering for the well-being and prosperity of mankind. UTM, prospering lives.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to the International Joint Conference on Medical Engineering, Sciences and Technology, iMEDiST 2021. For your information, this is the second day of the conference. I am Dr. Nurizati binti Muhammad Daud, from School of Biomedical Engineering and Health Sciences, University Technology Malaysia. On behalf of the Organizing Committee of iMEDiST 2021, we are honored to have all of you as part of our second days of virtual conference. We would like to invite our third keynote speaker, which is Prof. Dr. Nashi Widodo from Universitas Brawijaya, Indonesia. Assalamualaikum, Prof. How are you?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, I will tell them your biodata first. Prof. Nashi is a professor of molecular biology and aging at Brawijaya University, Indonesia. He graduated with bachelor in the same university in 1998 and received his master degrees of genetic and molecular biology at Bandung Institute of Technology. In 2001, he got JICA Fellow for training on cell and molecular of cancer at National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology, AIST, Tsukuba, Japan on 2003. Then obtained his doctoral course on medical school at the University of Tsukuba on 2008. Now, Prof. Nashi has been actively involved in research on elucidation the molecular mechanism of JAMU, which is the Indonesia traditional medicine, by using metabolomic, metagenomic, and bioinformatic approach. Without further ado, I would like to invite Prof. Dr. Nashi to deliver his speech entitled Integration of Bioinformatic and Omics Technology for Elucidating Health Promotion of JAMU. If you guys have any question, you may ask in Facebook chat and I will read it at the end of this presentation. Okay, Prof, the respected class is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning for everyone. Thank you for moderator, Dr. Isati, for the introductions. It is really great honor to be here for sharing what we are doing in our lab. And first of all, I would like thanks to the committee for the invitations. So in this occasion, I would like to talk about the integration between bioinformatic and omic technology for elucidate health promotion of JAMU. In this presentation, we will divide into three sections. The first, we will try to remember the history of the herbal medicines. And second, third, and maybe fourth, if the time is possible, just an example what we are doing and what we have done regarding to elucidate the mechanism of the complexity of the JAMU. And as we know from this map that majority of the world population still use traditional medicines. Even in Western countries, yeah, we can see like the US, I think Russia here, yeah, and also Australia, some Europe also, they still use traditional medicines. And of course, we are in Asian country, I think, still utilize traditional medicine, and most of them is herbal medicines. And for the part one, let's start the history on complexity of the JAMU. Yeah. Okay, let's start from the definition of the JAMU. JAMU is Indonesia traditional medicines. I think in Malaysia also called JAMU maybe. Yeah, that made by blend, yes, several herbals or animal product for human healing and rejuvenate. And we can see here that for the JAMU, yeah, in Indonesia, at least I think over than 24,000 herbs that we utilize for the JAMU. But of course, some is very rare, but some of them is very often they use. And the most important, I think, the herb that been used for the JAMUs like ginger, yeah, turmeric, I think, curcuma, and also noni. In this presentation also, I will talk about the noni, maybe in the next slide. And so, I think the JAMU is a very holistic that may only could be understood by employing the science complexity perspective rather than we just look for the active compound or single active compounds. And I think this philosophy is totally opposite compared with the modern medicines, especially for the Western medicines, that they are trying to look the single active compound, yeah, to work specific in the cell target, yeah. And we can see here that even though the JAMU, is traditional, but we cannot neglect of the JAMU resources like herbals, yeah. And I think we can see here that majority of the modern medicine also still came from of the herbals, yeah. And also we can see here, like I think even in Europe, yeah, they still utilize, I think, over than 1,000 medicinal plants for the medicines, yeah, for the drug. And one of the important thing is they still use around 90% of them harvested from the wild resources. I think this is one of the our concern, that we should conserve of the plants, I think. Otherwise, some of them, if they utilize many, and then maybe they will get extinct. Okay, then let's check this data. So you can see here that Indonesia utilized for at least 7,000 plant species, or 23% of the flora diversity that we have. And I think this is the number 3 largest after China. China is also, they use a lot, and also India, yeah, and Malaysia also here, yeah, they also use a lot, yeah. However, there are still some problematic aspect of the JAMU in Indonesia, especially like standardizations, yeah, scientific evidence, connection concept with modern medicinal frames, and also the complexity of the ingredients, yeah. Then now let's see about the history of the JAMU, yeah. This history of the JAMU exists, I think, long time ago. So we can see in the Borobudur relief, yeah, this relief, their story about how to make JAMU, yeah, in Indonesia. So I think the JAMU already along with the Indonesian history. However, the JAMU is well documented in the Almanac of the Jawa, which described here, I think, in the 15th century, yeah, in the Kartosuro Kingdom. They describe around, I think, often than 1,000 formula of JAMU. Yeah, so we have a lot of formula of the JAMU. Yeah. Then government tried to revive the traditional wisdom. Yeah, and then government make regulations that JAMU should have evidence base. Yeah, and then in the 2012, I think government also tried to standardize the JAMU, and they developed like a protocol how to standardize JAMU. And recently, this is a good news, I think. The government also, I think, give permissions for the hospital to prescribe the JAMU to cure the patient or for patient therapy. Yeah, I think this is a good condition, but still, I think that I talked earlier that JAMU has still problematic, and especially is standardizations. Yeah, and also scientific evidence. Yeah. Because we have very rare scientific evidence of the JAMU that already formulated by the community. So I think this is our challenge, yeah. And I think the standardization and modernization of the JAMU is really big task and homework for Indonesia governments. According to the survey, yeah, that over than 50% of Indonesia population still consume JAMU. Yeah, and we can see here that 10% is self-made. Yeah, we can imagine if they're self-made, and then how they will standardize the formula and also the efficacy of the JAMU. Yeah, I think this is our homework that is not easy. Yeah, and some of them still produce JAMU under very traditional conditions by home industry. Yeah, but our task is we try to look at least scientifications of the JAMU. Yeah. And even though the JAMU is still not standardized in Indonesia, but according to the survey also, this is very good, I think. Around 95% of the population who consume the JAMU, yeah, still they feel got benefit of the JAMU. Yeah. In this condition, also increasing the demands, and this also promote, I think, JAMU industry in Indonesia is growing, and so far at least around 1,600 companies of the JAMU, yeah, that already exist in Indonesia. Yeah, but still, yeah, concern regarding the evidence base of the JAMU is still lack. And on the 2017, I think, here, the Ministry of Health released the standard only 46 formula, yeah, among 1,000, over than 1,000 of formula that exist in the almanac books, because only that formula that has been well characterized and has approved by evidence base. Yeah. So that's why I think we have homework, and we try to help the government or maybe community also how to elucidate the molecular mechanism of the JAMU. So here we propose the framework for easy way, I think, to understanding complexity of the JAMU. So according to the previous definition, the JAMU mostly is contain several kind of the herb. Yeah, here. So we know that even one herb, they contain a lot of active compound. So we can see it here. For example, because the JAMU is contain a lot of herb, of course, there's a lot of kind of the active compounds. And this is like a very complex mechanism that we should understand how the JAMU work inside of the cell or inside of our body. Yeah, and easy way is we recently we have identified or at least characterized the active compound more with very easy way using the GC or LCMS. Yeah, and I think this technology is getting cheap. Yeah, and easy. You can find in several places in Indonesia. And then by the LCMS, we can at least we can identify what kind of the active compounds in the inside of the JAMU. And then we continue by Bioinformatic. And if we know the active compound, then we can predict the protein target here. Yeah, protein target. If we know the protein target, then we can predict what the function of the protein target, what kind of the protein network that may develop from the protein target. Yeah, here. So in that case, we work on silico using the bioinformatic analysis, and then we can draw the pathway, and we try to understand, and we can try to understand the mechanisms of the JAMU inside of our body through the molecular mechanism or pathway. Yeah, this is our purpose that I think is cheap, easy, and maybe robust for the understanding the complexity of the JAMU. Yeah, and then I think next slide. This is just of the example that we have done. Maybe I have 3 examples. I hope the time is enough. So the first example is I will try to understand the molecular mechanism combination between the 2 active compounds. Yeah, first is Phyllanthus niruri here and the curcuma manga. And the combination of the herb empirically used, for therapy breast cancer in patients, and most of them were recovered or at least improve the quality of life, by consume the combination of the active compounds. Then what we did is we tried to identify the active compound using the LCMS. And then we can see here, this is active compound that we identify using the LCMS, and this is active compound from the Phyllanthus niruri, and of course this is active compound from the curcuma manga. And from the active compound, we predict the protein target here. This is a protein target of the each of the active compound here. And then what we next do is we try to look what the function of the protein target. Protein target, how to understand the function of the protein target, we use analysis protein interaction here. So we can see here, all of here is protein target of the herb, and they are connected each other, and next we try to understand the function of the protein inside of the human body, and then we found that the protein is involved in the several kind of the mechanisms, like in the pathway of cancer, here. So from the pathway of cancer, then we look the what kind of genes and which part of the pathway, the gene of the target of the active compound of the herb is occurs. And then from the pathway we can see here, and the yellow one is gene that targeted by the active compound of the herb. So we can see here that at least, the important things in the upstream and one in the downstream, EGFR and MAP kinase 1. This is one of the target of the active compound of the combination of the 2 herbals. And then we try to understand whether the active compound of the herbal also may possible to block the 2 of the proteins. One is EGFR and second is MAP kinase 1. And then I did for the docking analysis, and from this docking analysis indicated that this active compound from the 2 herbals able to bind in the specific active site of the EGFR and also MAP kinase, and has binding affinity better than conventional drugs, like this one will be compared with the conventional drug like lipatinib, and then from this we try to look to understand in vitro levels And then we try to use cancer cell which express high of the IGFR, and then we treat it with the active compound. Yeah, either they are single herb here, yeah, or the combinations here. Yeah. So we can see here that either single or combination, they has similar activity. They block the cell cycle, or at least they are has toxicity to the cancer cells. And yeah, I think we can see here also that A is a single active compound, this curcuma, and C is Philanthus nigruri, and the B is a combination of the two herbs. Yeah. So in that case, we can see that the combination is in between A and C, yeah, in between of the single active compound, single herbals, yeah. And this is indicated that the combination, of course, there's not synergistic, but there's also not antagonistic. But this combination is look like substitute each other. And this is very important for the JAMU because, you know, JAMU sometimes is not standardized, and JAMU or herb is really active. Their active compound is really depending on how they're planted and also when they are harvested. Yeah, to maintain the active compound, then they formulate it, yeah, traditionally using the two of the herbal. Just in case one of them is lack of the active compound, they still be substituted by another herb. Yeah, I think that's all regarding to. I think was our first example that we have done in our lab regarding how to elucidate JAMU, especially for the anti-cancer. So in the second part, I would like to talk about JAMU, the combination of the herbals for the improve anemia. Yeah. So in Indonesia, usually there is three combination of herb. The first is coconut, especially the coconut waters, and red rice and soybean, traditionally used for improve anemia in community. Yeah. And then I would like to understand how and molecular mechanisms the combination of the herb able to be used for the anti-anemia. Yeah. What I did is same thing with the previous research. That the first we look, yeah, the active compound on each of the herbals. So, for example, this is a coconut, yeah, and then this is active compound of the red rice and then soybeans, and we look the potential protein target of the coconut water here, and we found it. This is a protein that targeted by this active compounds. Yeah, and then we try to understand the protein. Then that protein that targeted by the active compound of the herbals, yeah, inside of cells. So from this, yeah, then this list of the protein, then we look interaction the protein with another protein in our cells. Yeah, and from this analysis we can see here that in the middle this is protein that targeted from the herbals. They are interact with many kind of the protein. Yeah, that the protein has function or activity in controlling hematopoiesis here. And another, they also bind with another protein. I think many protein here, that the protein has function to control erythropoiesis. So from this analysis is in line with the traditional knowledge that combination of the herb that may potential for improve hematopoiesis stem cell, and also to improve the erythrocytes. And then we try to prove this concept. What we do is we use the animal model here, yeah, and we irradiate the animals, yeah, and then as we know that when the animal got irradiation, then they will defect on the bone marrow. At least they will destroy some of the stem cells, yeah, and then we divide it into 3 groups of the mice, yeah, irradiated mice. The first is we just keep it no treatments, yeah, as control. And the second, we treat it with erythropoietins. And the third, we treat it with the herbals, the polyherbals, yeah. And then we check the stem cell proliferation and also precursor of the erythrocyte and also leukocyte, yeah. And we can see here that very clearly that the EMSA is polyherbal that we thought, yeah, the polyherbal able to promote proliferation of the T and B cell here, like B220, CD8, yeah. And also CD4 here, and also CD25. And the important things, the herbal also able to increase the population of the TER119 as precursor of the erythrocyte, and even better than positive control here, yeah, here the erythropoietin conventional drug, yeah. So I think this is one of I think example that we able to use the omic and informatic to elucidate the mechanisms of the JAMU. And then the part 3, I think I would like to talk about the noni. Yeah, I think everybody know already noni, right? Yeah, noni. And Indonesia is a lot of noni juice that market in many places, yeah, and they claim that the noni has antihypertension, but when I search, I think still very rare or reference suggested or write that the molecular mechanism or detailed mechanism how noni juice or noni extract work as antihypertensions, yeah. And then this is a way that we have done. So first we took the noni fruit, and then we extract using methanol, and then we try to identify the active compound of the noni using LCMS and TCMS. And from the identification, so at least we found around 23, yeah, active compound from the noni, yeah. And then we try to understand whether the active compounds able to bind to the yeast protein. As we know that yeast, yeah, yeast is very important or well-known target, well-known the protein target for antihypertensions, especially for the captopril here, yeah. And then from the molecular docking, we found that at least 5 active compounds of the noni, they bind to the yeast in the site active, and even better compared with captopril in constanta inhibition, yeah, inhibition constant, and also binding energy here, yeah. And then from the in silico, we try to analysis using the in vitro. Yeah, in here we use the enzyme. Yeah, And in vitro also suggested the same thing, that the extract has ability to inhibit the its activity. So directly, yeah, to inhibit its activity directly. So we can see here. So they are work depending on dose or dose dependent manners. Yeah. Yeah, but because the noni has at least we found over than 23 active compounds, and according to the bioinformatic here, only 5 active compounds that may able to inhibit the ACE. Then I still interesting. I'm still interested to know whether other compound from noni have other functions. Yeah. To answer the question, and then I try to map or understand the protein target of the active compound of the noni extract. So we can see here, this is active compound of the noni, yeah, noni extract, and this one is protein that targeted by these active compounds, yeah. And then from this, yeah, protein, and then we try to understand whether the protein has connected each other or developed network. And we can see here that the protein targeted by the active compounds, yeah, they develop a network, and the PPAR alpha in the central, yeah, in the central, yeah. This picture, I think, this condition is confused me whether this network has good implication for health, especially hypertension patient, because so far hypertension is very rare associated with the PPAR alpha. Yeah, and then I try to browse in internet and saw that PPAR alpha has very important role in hypertension and inflammations. And this information has really encouraged me to continue analysis whether the extract also has anti-inflammations. Yeah. And then I tried to isolate the active compound, or at least I fractionate, yeah, of the noni extract, and fortunately, yeah, I found almost pure that contain linoleic acid, yeah, and mainly this linoleic acid or fatty acid has promising as PPAR alpha or PPAR gamma inducer. When the PPAR gamma induce, then they will stop expression, or they will suppress on the iNOS. As we know that iNOS is really important in the inflammation process in the tissue. Yeah. To prove this concept, the fraction content of fatty acid was given to the inflamed liver cells. Yeah, we use the inflamed liver cell to analysis to understand whether the fractions able to increase the PPAR alpha, and also to stop the inflammation process. So we can see here that after treated with the noni, yeah, the PPAR alpha also increase in dose-dependent manners, and followed by a reduction of the nitric oxide production here, and also iNOS expression also decrease, and follow with other pro-inflammatory genes like TNF alpha, also interleukin 6. Yeah. So the results of the study indicate that the use of metabolomic and bioinformatic technology is very supportive to analyze the mechanism of actions of herbal medicines, which is very complex, but must remain to be accomplished from this research. This is, I think, a challenge for all of us. And I think that's enough that I can share among some of the research activity that we have done in lab. And also we are very happy if someone want to cooperate both for the joint research and also student supervisions. So for everyone, so I am from the Brawijaya University. It's from the Malang. It's very small city. I think with very good weathers, with beautiful view, and very close to Bromo. So if someone want to go to Bromo, please visit us in the Brawijaya University in Malang. Yeah. And also I would like to acknowledge that Brawijaya University also this is I think the highest, we have the highest number of students in Indonesia, and we have total I think more than 60,000 students now. And also we also including top 10 best campus or university in Indonesia. So please come to our campus in Malang. Yeah, and I think that's all. And thank you for your kind attentions.
Thank you, Prof, for interesting presentation. I can see some familiar herbs here. You mentioning about Doni. In Malaysia, we call mengkudu.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Indonesia
Oh, same.
also in bahasa Indonesia we call mengkudu also.
Oh, okay. And andrographis is called hempedu bumi in Malaysia. I can see it called sambiloto in Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Prof. Thank you, Prof, once again for interesting presentation. I want to take some question and answer. If you have Q question for Prof. Okay, from Faiz. Professor, how is the pharmaceutical regulation of JAMU production in Indonesia and its implementation?
Yes. So I think some of the government regulations now permitted the hospital or medical doctor to prescribe the JAMU for the patient therapy. But of course, there is some stepping how the JAMU could be used for the therapy for the patient formerly in hospital. The JAMU should be should be standardized and should be approved by FDA. Yeah, not all of the JAMU, but some of the JAMU that has been proved by FDA that the JAMU has already been standardized.
Yeah, we need to ensure that all the JAMU is safe to consume for human, right, Prof?
Right.
Okay, Prof. For second question, in your opinion, you've mentioned about the polyherb, right? Okay, how many herb that we can consume at one time for it to deliver the function?
Yeah, I think it's really depending on the condition and depending on the formula. Yeah, and I have a research that's very comprehensive research that, for example, one of the herb we call the ashwagandha. There is herb from the India that I well studied, I think. So when we consume in the crude, so of course there's many kind of the active compounds, and there is safe and this is good for the human health. But when we isolate the active compound, single active compound, and we apply it on the animal models, they are very toxic. Yeah. So sometimes, we cannot say for general. It's depending on the formula and conditions, right? Because sometimes when the combination of the herb, they will stimulate for the synergistic. Yeah. So if one has toxicity, then they will neutralize by another's herb. Yeah, really depending on the conditions.
Hello. Hello, doctor. Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Okay, Prof. For the last question, what is your motivation in doing this research, Prof?
Yeah. So the, we try to help or at least to revive the traditional wisdom. Yeah, of course we have a wisdom, and this because of the modernizations, and then people they only appreciate, or at least they are trust with the modern drug or Western medicines, and by the modern drug, I think the drug price also getting expensive, and some of the community they not able to buy the very expensive drug. And then I would yeah revive the traditional wisdom that we know that in the traditional wisdom also has potential, yeah, for promoting human health.
Yeah, Prof, it's true. True. Okay. Prof, because of time constraint, you have to stop here. Once again, thank you, Prof, for being with us
Thank you
today.
very much
Okay.
for the invitations.
Yeah, Prof. We hope to see you in the near future.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Take
Maybe not
care.
virtually. Okay. Okay, Prof.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, so iMEDiST, you can.
Next, we will move to the presentation from ICBME invited speaker. For ICBME, please stay. For ICBME participant, please stay to hear the presentation from invited speaker. As for iMEDiTech, you may proceed to the dedicated parallel session in your dedicated room. See you in a short time. Now, we're moving on to our second invited speaker. Uh, I invite Dr. Sahar Mohsin to deliver her presentation. Dr. Sahar Mohsin is an assistant professor of anatomy at the United Arab Emirates University (UAE). She obtained her doctorate degree in anatomy from National University of Ireland in 2005. Previously, Dr. Sahar had worked in different universities including the Royal College of Surgeons Ireland and Queen Mary of University of London. Dr. Sahar has been actively involved in research in the areas of medicine and tissue engineering. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Sahar Mohsin to deliver her presentation entitled Biomimetic Bone Scaffold for Clinical Application.
College of Medicine and Health Sciences, United Arab Emirates University based in Al Ain, UAE. I would like to thank you to invite me to share my research work on this forum. It's a pity that we have to do it virtually, otherwise I would love to visit the beautiful city of Johor Bahru. Hopefully we would be able to overcome the challenges that we all are facing due to COVID-19 and able to arrange events on site soon. I would like to talk to you about my research work, which is entitled as Biomimetic Bone Scaffolds for Clinical Applications. Bone is the second most transplanted tissue in humans. The average yearly number of the bone graft surgeries performed is more than 2 million, costing 2.5 billion US dollars, hence impose huge burden on healthcare system. With an increasingly elderly population, there is proportionate increase in bone injuries due to arthritis, postmenopausal osteoporosis, and senile osteoporosis. And along with that, we also see limb trauma injuries requiring hospitalization. Incidence of bone diseases on the rise in population where aging is coupled with obesity and poor physical activity. Here you can see in the image on the right, a woman as it is aging, you can see a good example of a postmenopausal osteoporosis. The bones, they are becoming thinner and thinner, and the size of the hole is increasing. The bones are getting fragile, they are getting porous, right? And these women, they are susceptible to fractures. On the left hand side, there is an example of a trauma coming to the hospital. In the x-ray shows the fracture of the bones of the forearm, and it is metallic implant has been placed for repair work. Current treatments for bone loss are autograft, allograft, and even xenograft. Autograft is regarded as a gold standard treatment for bone loss, but all of them have numerous limitations, including tissue availability, compatibility, pain, bleeding, potential for infection, and immune rejection. Thus, there is a great need to develop bone substitute to meet the epidemiologically driven demand. Bone tissue engineering. It has provided a new choice for the treatment of bone defect. It aims not only to replace the missing bone, but also helps the body to regenerate new bone. This technique reduces the healing time and promotes osseointegration. As you can see in this image, what we need for bone tissue engineering is a starting material, a biomaterial, to synthesize the scaffold. The scaffold, it should provide optimal biochemical and biomimetic environment to culture the cells. Growth factors such as BMP or tissue growth factor or IGF can be added to enhance the bone formation. The scaffold is then placed within the defective area in the bone, and it should be osteoinductive so that the new bone can be generated, and the scaffold is degraded after its job is done and bone is repaired. Fabrication of bone scaffold is a crucial step in bone tissue engineering. This scaffold is a 3D construct which will serve as a temporary support to allow cells to proliferate and grow and form a new tissue before it is placed back into the host tissue. Now let's see the general structure of a bone. Here in this image on the left hand side, a bone from an upper limb from the arm is shown. The bone is humerus. Typically, it is one of the long bones. A typical long bone consists of a upper or lower proximal and distal epiphysis, and the central area, which is the shaft, is called diaphysis. The outer covering of the bone is formed of a periosteal membrane, which is shown over here in outermost boundary. Then inside you can see there is two types of a bone. An outer rigid or brittle bone is known as a compact bone, and inside, especially in the epiphysis, upper and lower epiphysis, we have a bone with lot of holes in it. It's a porous bone. This bone is known as a spongy bone. The other name for a spongy bone is a cancellous bone or a trabecular bone. So a typical long bone has a compact bone on the outside and spongy bone on the inside. If you look at the magnified image of a spongy bone, the spongy bone has quite a number of large holes in it which are separated by means of a trabeculae. These pores are interconnected, allowing the blood vessels, which is colored red in the image, to enter through the nutrient foramina. The blood vessels enter the inside of the bone and they ramify. The pores allow the blood vessels to go throughout the bone structure. If you look at the chemical composition of the bone, it is broadly divided into two main phases. It has a mineral phase which constitute around 60 to 70%, and it has 25 to 30% of an organic phase. The mineral phase is dominated by the presence of calcium and phosphate, which is present in the form of hydroxyapatite crystals, and in minor amount it also have ions like magnesium, sodium, potassium, zinc and strontium, and few other ions as well. Organic phase is predominated by the presence of a collagen. 95% of it is collagen, but it does have small amount of non-collagen protein as well, like osteocalcin or osteopontin, and it also has some bone cells. The small amount, about 5 to 10%, it also has water in it. Now we know the normal structure and composition of the bone. We must define the ideal criteria for bone scaffolds. What are the parameters on which we should make a bone scaffold? Ideally, the bone scaffold, it should be biocompatible, should not evoke any immune reaction within the body. It should be biodegradable. It should dissolve after the job is done safely. It should have interconnected porosity because we want the blood vessels to go into the bone and ramify. It should be bioactive because it will induce the bone formation, and it should be mechanically stable. The global scaffold technology market size is actually valued at 1.1 billion in 2020, and it is expected to grow further at an annual growth rate of 8.4% from 2021 to 2028. The growth in this segment is due to the extensive application of scaffold technology by these end users. The end user over here are the biotechnology and pharmaceutical organization, as shown in this graph over here. Research laboratories and institutes, secondly, the light purple color. Then it is used by the hospitals and diagnostic centers, right? And there are some other users as well. This technology is used to prepare bones, cartilage, heart valves, tendon repair, and pharmaceutical agencies use it as a vehicle for drug delivery. There are a number of scaffolds now commercially available that mimic the structure of the bone, but each one has some limitation. They either lack mechanical stability. If they are made purely of ceramic or glasses, they are quite brittle. If they are made up of only polymer, they show quick degradation. There is a problem of leaking and eliciting inflammatory response in the tissues. Therefore, there is a need to develop some new, more biomimetic bone scaffolds. Right choice of a biomaterial is really important to synthesize the bone scaffolds. Broadly, we divide them into two categories: naturally derived biomaterials like alginate, silk, or collagen, or synthetic biomaterials such as ceramics or polymers. Both categories are widely used in medical field as orthopedic or dental implants. In our earlier studies, we have used alginate and bioactive glass to synthesize bone scaffolds. In this research work, we will be using a nanohydroxyapatite which is doped with strontium and zinc. Hydroxyapatite is actually a revolutionary material. Because of its chemical and structural similarity to natural bone mineral phase, it is widely used in periodontology and various orthopedic applications. It has excellent osteoconductive capacity. It is a bioactive product and it promotes bone to implant integration. If you look in this image on the right, it shows the lattice structure of hydroxyapatite, the position for the phosphate, calcium and hydroxyl ions, which they can be actually replaced by some other useful ions as well, like strontium, zinc, magnesium, copper or any other ions which are listed below as well. Presence of strontium actually increases the bone formation. Additionally, it is also anti-resorptive. Strontium ranelate is a medicine which is prescribed by the clinicians in cases of severe postmenopausal osteoporosis and senile osteoporosis. Presence of zinc actually helps in the growth of the bone. It is anabolic. Additionally, it is also bactericidal. Use of nanoparticles increases the surface area to which proteins can bind and hence increases osteointegration. This idea of using hydroxyapatite is not new. It dates back to 1970s. It was used for the repair of teeth enamel by the Japanese company after the astronaut lost minerals from the teeth and bone, and NASA proposed in synthetic hydroxyapatite as a repairing material. Another biomaterial that we have used in this research work is a polymer PLGA. It is a biocompatible and biodegradable polymer approved by the FDA, and it is widely used to fabricate devices for drug delivery and in various tissue engineering applications. Traditional practices of using single-phase synthetic or natural materials have only met with limited success. For example, nanohydroxyapatite, if used on its own, has slow biodegradation. It is brittle and insufficient mechanical properties that do not match the mechanical properties of bone. Similarly, PLGA has very fast biodegradability and it is not a bioactive biomaterial. Therefore, use of composite materials can offer the beneficial properties of multiple materials, and that is a better strategy to form the bone substitute. And if you look at the bone structure, it itself is a composite material of organic and inorganic phase. A variety of fabrication techniques are used in the bone tissue engineering, such as particle leaching, sol gel forming, electrospinning, phase separation, and 3D printing. We will be using freeze drying and supracritical forming in this project. Freeze drying and both of these techniques, they are very simple. The apparatus is available on campus. The supracritical forming is regarded as a desirable forming agent, the supracritical carbon dioxide, because of its non-toxicity. It is cost efficient, non-inflammability, and easy accessibility for attaining the critical point with excellent solubility in polymers. So we will be using the supracritical forming technique to induce porosity within the scaffolds. This brings us to the aims and objectives section of our presentation. The main aims being to fabricate a novel composite scaffold that could be used as bone substitute, to use as a simple reproducible technique to generate bone scaffolds, and to characterize them for biocompatibility, bioactivity, porosity, biodegradability, and mechanical properties. The hydroxyapatite was synthesized using a standard wet precipitation method. The image shows over here briefly describe how we made the hydroxyapatite. We mixed together the calcium nitrate and ammonium hydroxide solution and maintained the pH at 11. The precipitation was carried out by the dropwise addition of ammonium hydroxide phosphate to the solution under vigorous mixing. The obtained calcium phosphate precipitate was aged overnight at room temperature, centrifuged and washed. The powder obtained was then doped with strontium and zinc. We prepared 1%, 2.5% and 4% of strontium and zinc doped nanohydroxyapatite. The hydroxyapatite powder that was formed earlier, it was mixed with PLGA in a concentration of 1 mole% added to the 3 mole% by weight of PLGA. The first two scaffolds, they were controlled. In the first scaffold, there is no polymer was added, and in the second scaffold, there is no hydroxyapatite was added. And in third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, we added the strontium and zinc to the concentration of 1%, 2.5%, and 4%. The composite was added into a custom-made mold, which is shown here on the left, metallic structure. It is 12 mm in diameter and 15 mm in height. The cylindrical shaped scaffold was formed. The porosity was induced by subjecting it to supracritical carbon dioxide technique. The nanohydroxyapatite powder with or without strontium and zinc and all the composite scaffolds was characterized with particle analyzer, TEM, FTIR, XRD, and SEM. The bioactivity of the scaffold was determined by the formation of an apatite-like phase in the SBF. The degradation behavior was determined by the change of the pH values and percentage weight loss in SBF. ICP-MS was carried out to investigate the release of calcium, strontium, and zinc ion. And samples were mechanically tested under compression with a displacement velocity of 2 mm per minute using the universal testing system Instron 5960 equipped with 5 kN load cell. Here we can see the TEM image of an analysis of particle size of hydroxyapatite. In image A, where it is the pure hydroxyapatite, we can see a needle-like long hydroxyapatite particles. When it is mixed with 1% and 2.5% and 4% strontium and zinc shown in B, C and D images, the particle size becomes smaller and they become agglomerated. Perhaps the substitution of large strontium ion into small calcium lead to denser atomic packaging of the system, causing retardation of crystal growth. When the crystal has less freedom to grow, the formation of tricalcium phosphate could be blocked and the particle size may have become smaller. The average particle size of hydroxyapatite was 92 nanometer, and when it is doped with strontium and zinc hydroxyapatite, it was around 86.6 nanometer. The phase composition and crystallinity of the samples were analyzed using an X-ray diffractometer and was compared to standards. Here in the graph on the left hand side shows the X-ray XRD of the powder, the nanohydroxyapatite powder, and it is doped with strontium and zinc in different concentrations. And on the right hand side it shows the XRD of a composite scaffolds. In both, we can see that the peaks of hydroxyapatite, they are evident in the scaffolds on the right hand side, and even when we mix the pure hydroxyapatite with zinc and strontium, slight change it has occurred. The width of the diffraction peak suggests that the crystallinity of the apatite, it decreases with increase of the dopants, the strontium and zinc, when we are added, and it is more evident when we have added the 4% strontium and zinc. The structure and chemical bonds of the powders were determined using FTIR. Here you can see the FTIR spectrum of a typical nanohydroxyapatite. Important functional groups of phosphate ion at 570, the carbonate ion at 869, right, and 1041 for again phosphate peak, and carbonate again at 1461 is shown. Then we also can see the at 3568 the hydroxyl group. This is how a typical nanohydroxyapatite look like. We have compared this with the our results, and we were able to get the peaks of the hydroxyapatite at the usual position as shown before. Right? So we can see the peak for the phosphate, carbonate, and hydroxyl ion at the just like a typical nanohydroxyapatite structure, and it was copied, it was replicated in the when we mixed it with strontium and zinc, as well as when we mix it with the polymer. Additionally, we can also see a peak of carbonyl peak of a PLGA in all the scaffolds. However, there is widening of the peaks, especially it is when the strontium and zinc is added, and it is evident especially in S4 scaffold with 4% concentration of strontium and zinc. The CH peak of PLGA, however, is not copied into the fourth scaffold. Thermogravimetric analysis of scaffold was also carried out. All the scaffolds were thermally stable till 312 degrees centigrade, as you can see in this graph. Nanohydroxyapatite, which is shown the yellow line in this image, after 312 degrees centigrade, it shows a flat curve, and the residual weight loss was 95%. PLGA is shown by a black line. It is in this graph, and you can see that it continues to lose weight until 450 degrees centigrade. It becomes flat. So the residual weight is nothing, zero. So however, adding strontium and zinc to the scaffold increases the thermal stability, and the residual weight was around 15 to 20% for all the composite scaffold at a higher temperature of around 450 and 470. The porous structure of scaffold was confirmed by the SEM study. We found that the pores were interconnected, and the average size of pores ranged between 372 to 401, which is appropriate for neovascularization. The interconnected porous structure you can see on the image, gray image on the right hand side. It is the SEM of our synthesized bone substitute, and it mimicked that of a human bone, which is shown on the left hand side, the SEM of a human femur. So the porous structure that we were able to achieve, it will facilitate cell growth, proliferation, as well as diffusion of nutrients and removal of waste products. Essential requirement for an artificial material to bond to living bone is by the formation of apatite on its surface once implanted in the body. The bioactivity of composite scaffold was investigated by evaluating the formation of apatite on their surface in SPF for different time intervals. The SPF is the stimulated body fluid with ion concentration is equal to those of human plasma. The ability of a scaffold to make the apatite layer in SPF is regarded as a pretty standard technique in vitro for predicting in vivo bone bioactivity, and it actually reduces the number of animal studies. The SEM images shown over here shows that the hydroxyapatite crystal formation has increased on the surface of the scaffold having higher amount of strontium and zinc. All these three images are from the composite scaffold. The one on the two above shows the concentration in 1% and 2.5%, and the lower image shows is of the scaffold with 4% strontium and zinc, and it is heavily coated by the apatite layer, which is shown by red arrow in all three images. The pH values and weight loss of the four scaffolds immersed in SPF at different time points is shown over here in these two images. The graph on the left hand side shows you the pH values. Once the composite scaffolds were immersed in the SBF, initially the scaffold showed an increase in the pH value, and then it slightly decreases, but it attains the alkaline pH above 7.5, which is actually good for the bone formation. PLGA on its own shows the acidic pH route, and it further goes down with time. The scaffolds with more concentration of strontium and zinc actually are more alkaline. If we look now at the graph on the right hand side, it shows the biodegradability of the scaffolds. Composite scaffold has slower degradation rate, and polymer, if you see the bottom black line, it actually shows a very fast resorbability. This resorbability it is improved by adding the concentration of strontium and zinc. The ideal scaffold should possess an adequate degradation rate, which should match the bone formation rate at the site of the fracture. ICP-MS study was carried out to measure the ion releasing capability of the scaffold, because we have doped these scaffolds with strontium and zinc, and we would like to see if the lattice structure of the apatite is able to release it once if these scaffolds are implanted in the body. So here we carried out the study in SPF fluid, and we can, as you can see from the graphs, right, on the top left it shows the release for the calcium, then on the top on the right shows the release from the strontium, and below it shows the release profile of the zinc. So we can see that the scaffolds were able to release these ions, and the maximum release of ion was shown by the composite scaffold having higher concentration of zinc and strontium. Mechanical properties of fabricated scaffold were assessed using a compressive mechanical test, and the stress strain curve, which is shown on the left over here, showed that the scaffolds with 2.5 concentration of strontium and zinc showed the best mechanical properties, with increase in ultimate strength by 37% when we compared with the pure non-nanohydroxyapatite scaffold. Right? However, as we increase the strontium and zinc concentration to 4%, there is a remarkable drop in the ultimate strength, which is shown in this bar chart over here on the right. Now, this drastic drop in the scaffold, it could be as a result of poor dispersion between PLGA and the strontium and zinc dope hydroxyapatite. Right? So we looked at the scaffold again that was tested for compression. The one with the higher concentration of strontium and zinc, it showed a brittle type of a fracture, and when we look closely we can actually see with the on naked eye examination as well that a polymer was not fully dissolved in the apatite. So this brings me to the end of my presentation, and we can conclude that in this research work we were able to synthesize bioactive bone composite using the nanohydroxyapatite and PLGA. We were able to use successfully the supracritical carbon dioxide to induce porosity within the scaffold. The bone scaffold, they showed appropriate biodegradability, thermal stability, and release of strontium and zinc from the scaffold. And the scaffolds, especially the 2.5% strontium and zinc containing hydroxyapatite composite scaffold, showed appropriate mechanical strength and can be used as a bone substitute. The field of bone tissue engineering definitely can optimize the available bone treatments. However, a step-ladder approach is required to move from these in vitro experiments to clinical application. We must do some more experiments to culture the cells in vitro, then move to the animal studies of lower order to high, and then make it translational and available to humans. This research work is an essence of a multidisciplinary research team, and I would like to thank all of them. So Mozan Hassan Osman is our PhD student. Then we have Professor Abbas Khalil from Department of Chemistry, College of Science at UAU. We have Mohsin Sulaiman, who worked on this project. He's a postdoc researcher at the university. Professor Ali Marzuki who is based in chemical and petroleum engineering. He and his student Emmanuel, they help us in the supracritical carbon dioxide technique. So I would like to thank all of them and thank the university for providing the funding for carrying out the research work. I will end my presentation by thanking all of you for paying attention and listening to our research work. Thanks.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Dr. Sahar, for the presentation. We hope that this presentation will benefit everyone here. Unfortunately, she is not with us today due to the time difference. Now, all the participants should be ready for the next parallel session at dedicated room. We will resume at 2 p.m. for the fourth keynote speaker and stay tuned for the award and closing ceremony. Good luck to all participants. Thank you.